matters financial and geopolitical from a frontier, and thank you kindly for stopping by. I'd first like to thank Tamisha and David Williams of CNBC Africa for the interview that we did earlier this morning, and I had them all to myself. Rather amusing because I was listening in at one point, and they realised I was listening in because I slurped some coffee. Very amusing, all blacks. Tamisha's fender got broken, and rather witty repartee about that as well. And we were talking about the Nairobi Securities Exchange, the frontier, a bunch of things, and hopefully they'll post that on their website. Macro thoughts go back to the dollar as they have been for a while, and I'll just go back by date. On the 29th of September, I said the point I'm making is that the dollar has just started getting going. There will be blood in the water. There is a small window if we want to be the sharks. And on the 1st of September, I said the dollar has embarked on a meaningful and broad-based rally as investors anticipate a rate hike in the US ahead of all other developed economies. And I think that remains the case. And on the 25th of August, when I said the dollar has been punching higher, if things tip big, the dollar might soar, and I think that is indeed the case. Home thoughts go back to Mario Vargas Llosa, who said, "Memory is a snare, pure and simple. It alters, it subtly rearranges the past to fit the present." I tweeted flowers for freedom to Ai Weiwei today, of some flowers I had in the garden early in the morning. Another quote from Mario Vargas Llosa: "We invent fictions in order to live somehow the many lives we would like to lead when we barely have one at our disposal." I'm in Dubai from later tonight until Friday. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of Dubai from the sky. And as I said in February, it's the real transit state, a connection point in an interconnected century. Political reflections: Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff was placed first in Sunday's election, but did not get enough votes to avoid a runoff, so we're going into a runoff there. I'll put up a photograph from the New Yorker of a pro-democracy protester in Mong Kok, a working-class neighborhood in Hong Kong, on Friday. This is Occupy Central. Global Research typically takes the following slant: the primary domestic objectives of the umbrella revolution is to unleash a contagion of chaos to sweep through coastal China and severely undermine and weaken, if not overthrow, the Communist Party's leadership. The idea is to create a battering ram to break centralized control and initiate a chaotic chain reaction that spreads into all of China's megapolises via copycat movements. The end result is to create as much domestic chaos as possible, to throw the authorities off balance and provoke another Tiananmen Square event. I concluded by saying the authorities, in my view, in Beijing are in fact treading on eggshells, and I think Occupy Central could tip and spread like wildfire. I spoke about the tinder box being a periphery. That time I was speaking about Xinjiang, and I said I see the pivot to Asia as the encirclement of China, then the shrinking of its operating theatre, and then lighting the tinderbox that is the periphery. And at that time I was saying Xinjiang might well morph into China's Afghanistan, saying that the US probably feels it has a decisive hard power advantage at this moment, and given that the trajectory is one of gradual erosion of that decisive advantage, leads me to the view that this pivot to Asia has a logic and momentum of its own. I also spoke about the air-sea battle concept and distant blockade operations, which I think is the most important piece of that pivot document. I like this quote by Khodorkovsky: "All authoritarian regimes, especially ones like this that aren't based on an ideology but on an individual person, are highly unstable." Actually, I think Russia he is a very powerful personality, but there is a structure behind him as well. In order to retain power, such authoritarian leaders are forced to burn the field all around themselves, which is what Putin is doing. Ebola outbreak over the weekend confirmed deaths 3,439 people, or 46% of the 7,492 probable confirmed and suspected cases as of October the 1st. I'll put up an image of Ebola virus particles. They're the ones in blue, budding from a chronically infected cell. This is on Flickr via Wired. I learned that a pilot from Sabina Airlines brought a shiny blue thermos and a letter from a doctor in Kinshasa, in what was then Zaire. This is the fellow who discovered Ebola. I still remember exactly one day in September, a pilot from Sabina Airlines brought us a shiny blue thermos and a letter from a doctor in Kinshasa, in what was then Zaire. In the thermos, he wrote, there was a blood sample from a Belgian nun who had recently fallen ill from a mysterious sickness in Yambuku, a remote village in the northern part of the country. He asked us to test the sample for yellow fever. These days, Ebola may only be researched in high-security laboratories. How did you protect yourself back then? We had no idea how dangerous the virus was. There were no high-security labs in Belgium. We just wore our white lab coats and protective gloves. When we opened the thermos, the ice inside had largely melted, and one of the vials had broken. Blood and glass shards were floating in the ice water. We fished the other intact test tube out of the slop and began examining the blood for pathogens using the methods that were standard at the time. The tests for Lassa fever and typhoid were also negative. What then could it be? Our hopes were dependent on being able to isolate the virus from the sample. To do so, we injected it into mice and other lab animals. At first, nothing happened for several days. We thought that perhaps the pathogen had been damaged from insufficient refrigeration in the thermos. But then one animal after the next began to die. We began to realize that the sample contained something quite deadly. The Independent is carrying a report that the Ebola outbreak, the virus could reach the UK and France by the end of the month, and that's a given the interconnectedness of the new world we live in. Sierra Leone records 121 Ebola deaths in a single day. And then the interesting article and research on about how HIV was first identified in 1981. And the AIDS epidemic ballooned for more than a decade until antiretroviral drugs were created. That's an interesting story. Joe Biden's got in a lot of trouble. He's apparently said at Harvard, President Erdogan told me he's an old friend, said you were right, we let too many people through. Now we're trying to seal the border, Biden said during a speech on foreign policy at the Harvard Kennedy School on October the 2nd. He said that regional allies of the US determined to take down Syrian President Bashar Assad poured hundreds of millions of dollars and tens of thousands of tons of weapons into anyone who would fight against Assad. Accepted the people would be in supply for al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and extremist elements of jihadists coming from other parts of the world. Our biggest problems, he said, is our allies. Our allies in the region were our largest problem in Syria. The Turks were great friends. I have a great relationship with Erdogan that I spent a lot of time with, the Saudis, the Emiratis, etc. What were they doing? Biden asked. So now what is happening? All of a sudden everybody is awakened. Now we have, and the president has been able to put together a coalition of our Sunni neighbors, because America can't once again go into a Muslim nation and be the aggressor. It has to be led by Sunnis to go and attack a Sunni organization, Biden said. I think he very much meant what he said. Now, of course, the killer who speaks with a British accent is believed to be the man responsible for the previous beheadings, has reappeared. This is London rapper Abdel Majid Abdel Bari, otherwise known as El Jinni, lyricist Jinn or Jihadi John. Of course, that's a play on the word jinn. who are smokeless and scorching, are made of smokeless and scorching fire, usually invisible to humans, but humans do appear clearly to jinn as they can possess them. Jinn have the power to travel large distances at extreme speeds and are thought to live in remote areas, mountains, seas, trees, and the air. And as I said previously, beheadings are spreading like a virus. Boko Haram published a video that shows charred plane wreckage and the beheading of a man identified as a pilot of a missing Nigerian Air Force jet. And that is further to the point about beheadings. West is now in Syria because ISIS and its friends have failed to defeat Assad. This is the redirection risk about which we've spoken. North Korea, Kim Jong-un falls off the radar as the two Koreas agree to talk. The question, it still remains. Kim has not been seen in public for a month, but yesterday, among many service suits at the Asian Games in Incheon, South Korea, appeared a vice marshal of the Korean People's Army, the North's second most powerful person. Wearing an olive uniform, Hwang Pyong-so had arrived. Currency markets, euro-dollar fell sharply on Friday, now trading around 125.30, dollar index at 86.50, Japanese yen 109.62, Swissy 0.9764, pound below 160 at 159.83, Aussie 0.8691, India rupee 61.72, South Korean won 1070.25, Rial 245.89, Egyptian pound 714.72, South African rand 11.34, 31.48. The dollar has gained 4.9% in the past month. Euro has lost 0.7. Yen has fallen 0.4. It's even more dramatic in its gains against the higher yielding currencies. Russian ruble down 18% this year. Argentine peso down 23% this year. Quite often you see action at the periphery. It's quite interesting. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. I'm extremely bullish about that. 7-week rally now, first time since June 2010. Euro dollar 125 and change. I think it's headed lower, touched a 2-year low of 125.01. I was reading a piece in The Guardian which concludes by saying that's not to say that once in a while we can't let our thinning hair down, put the bucket heads on the stereo and party like it's 1995. That reminded me of Kenny Dope and the Bucketheads, the song called "Will Bomb." These sounds fall into my mind. I personally prefer Delight, and I'll put up a link for Good Beat, which is a wonderful song that Delight did, and I'll put up an image of Delight from their album World Kink. Gold below 1200. Last time I looked, 1188.25. I think it's going lower still. Crude oil traded below 90. Popped itself back above 90. 88.50 is the key area of support. But increasingly, my sense is the Saudis have turned the taps on rather than off. And in order to put pressure on Russia, in part, and I think we're going to continue to see an oil price which is on the defensive, notwithstanding this extraordinary uncertain world that we currently exist in. Somali troops captured a key port town of Baraway from the Al-Shabaab. The AU told the BBC that joint forces were not yet in full control of the town, and the AU had parked its heavy armour on its outskirts. Baraway is 220 kilometres southwest of Mogadishu, has not been run by the central government for 23 years. The AU says Al-Shabaab used Baraway as a base to launch attacks on the capital. Residents said many of the Al-Qaeda-aligned militants had begun withdrawing from the key port town on Friday. The situation is calm. The militiamen had fled before the forces reached the town. And I think this is an important achievement militarily, because Baraway, you will remember, was where the US Navy SEAL team failed in an attempt to kill an Al-Shabaab leader in Somalia. That was last year, I think. A US Navy SEAL team attacked the leader, Mukhtar Abu Zubair, at his seaside villa in Baraway, south of capital Mogadishu, in a pre-dawn sea-launched attack. US forces were forced to withdraw at that time. So that's quite an interesting military success, I think. South African all-share down about 4,000 points from a record high at 22-week lows. It's up 5.095% year-to-date. Dollar rand I think is going to go to 12, frankly. Last trading 11.31. Egyptian pound, as it's been for quite a considerable time, 7.15. Egyptian stock market up 43.42% year to date, second only to Dar es Salaam in Africa. Nigeria all shares 17-week lows, down 0.546% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange at 3-week lows, that's up only 3.589%, but remember Ghana bonds have been outperforming. Business confidence in Kenya appears to be extremely strong. This is a Standard Chartered report, business sentiment indicator that they put out. Optimism broad-based, 10 of the 15 current condition indicators picked up. This is a new type of report that they've put out. New orders increased for a third consecutive month, reaching a new series high, apparently. Diana Beach was voted one of the best beaches in the world, and I'll put up on the coast, be voted the best beach destination in Africa, and indeed it's wonderful. Put up a photograph taken 279 days ago, taken at Southern Palms, which is on Diana Beach. The ocean was still like glass. Another one taken 46 days ago, when you will notice there was just a single tourist. Kenya shilling 89.30. This is a key area of support. The central bank intervened last time just above here and probably will do so again. Nairobi all share eked out a 0.02% gain on Friday. It's up 19.765% year to date. NSE 20 rallied quite sharply, 42 points on Friday. It's up 7.4299% year to date, and 2.1% below a 6-year high reached on the 22nd of September. Katrina Manson has written a very interesting piece about rhinos among the rolling hills of Kenya's Laikipia district, far from the battlegrounds of Al-Shabaab militants in southern Somalia, wanders one of the jihadi group's more unlikely victims, the rhinoceros. A precipitous drop in Kenyan tourism due to terror attacks by the Al-Qaeda-linked militants has hammered receipts in the safari destination, undermining costly anti-poaching efforts. Of all the big five game animals favoured by sightseers, rhino are the hardest and most expensive to protect, costing an estimated $20 million a year across the country's 15 rhino sanctuaries. Al-Shabaab may be partly to blame for poaching. Some monitoring bodies allege the group is involved in smuggling lucrative rhino horn, whose value today outstrips that of gold or cocaine. Last year, poachers killed close to 5% of Kenya's remaining 1,032 rhino, twice the number of the previous year. It's incredibly sad, really very depressing, I must admit. We were not far from where Katrina's been, in Lewa, and we saw these two male rhinos, who are magnificent creatures, and I really hope we can protect them. Moving to the stock market, the NSE 20 rallied sharply on Friday, 42.77 points. It's 114 points below. It's more than 6-year closing high of 5406.39, reached on the 22nd of last month. Equity turnover thinned out on Friday, actually, which can be a bullish signal, signaling that supply is compromised at this price point. Limuru tea rallied 9.66% to a fresh all-time high, 965. It's up 93% this year. This is all about real estate, isn't it? Limuru tea, the estate is based just on the periphery of Nairobi. It's become extremely valuable real estate. Safaricom closed at 1270, but there were 4 buyers for every single seller at the finish line. Scanning Group rallied 4.733%. It's following on today. Uchumi, where there's a lot of talk of being a potential takeover target firm, 2.415%. The banks will be reporting towards the end of the month their third quarter numbers. BATs, which had surged 7.35% early in the week, served up a fresh all-time closing high, eked out again, closed at 950. That's delivered a 63.91% return. Total return all year. Total and Kennel are on the firming up, as is Kengen Everready, which touched and closed at 5 on the news that it rallied 78.18% on Tuesday last week on the news that it was going to flip from batteries into real estate. has in fact retreated to 410, but I think you'll find support here at 410. Once again, I'm off to Dubai, and I'll return on this podcast in a week's time. Thank you for stopping by.